acting is a very special woman profession. Women have much more talent for acting.
Bergman, during his interview for his most famous film Persona, stated that he prefers working with women as they have more talent for acting and, unlike men, enjoy looking at themselves in the mirror being audiences or the camera. He attributed this to their education. What he's describing, however, has a name. It's a male gaze, and it's not something that can be attributed to the women's education. So that got me thinking, is Bergman actually representing women well in his film, or his representation is somewhat misogynistic, as some critics argue? Did he see women as extension of himself, as he famously had a romantic relationship with all leading actresses? At the same time, it's hard to find another major male director of the 20th century who gave female characters as much psychological depth and complexity as Bergman did. His women grapple with questions of existence of God, meaning and purpose of life, questions that usually reserved for men. And ultimately, was his depiction actually misogynistic, or he could just never understand women? Let's dive into this. Guys, in advance for my voice because I got a bit sick and I'm suffering. But also tell you about my Substack newsletter where I talk about films. Recently the community have crossed 600 people, which is crazy. So if you want to talk about films together, join in and subscribe. The link is in the video description. François Truffaut, French director of the French New Wave, once said about Bergman, while ostensibly cis and straight, Bergman felt like a combination of the gay men casting women as themselves and a straight man casting women as objects of desire.
A woman by education is not ashamed of looking at herself.
As I said before, what he's describing is a concept developed by Laura Mulvey, feminist and film theorist in the 1970s, and it's a male gaze. Basically, she said that women were portrayed in film as objects of male desire and as someone to be looked at, while men did the looking. But it goes beyond film. It actually reminds me of a concept developed by Foucault, the metaphor that he made with the prison of Panopticon, comparing the model world to the prison where only one guard is placed in the middle, and he can constantly watch the prisoners, while prisoners never know if they're being watched or not, and therefore start policing themselves. So in patriarchy, women are born with internalized panopticon. As our society places so much value on women's appearance, we are basically policing themselves and always see ourselves through eyes of others. For that reason, I don't agree with Bergman that women actually enjoy looking at the mirror. They just learned that they have no choice but face it. And was he so naive anyway to believe that only men can look at themselves and be dissatisfied or disappointed? As the Guardian article, Bergman, Why the Great Director's Women, All Tragisexual Goddesses, writes, did he really imagine that a sense of dissatisfaction at one's own reflection was restricted to balding Asian males and that women were all as beautiful as the goddesses of his own movie universe? Or was he using women and female characters to exalt his own narcissism and male anxiety? I think answer lays in Bergman himself. He often spoke about having demons like fear, rage, and severe anxiety, and he projected all of those experiences mostly on his female characters.
That is a marvelous feeling, that from existing I'm not existing. And at that moment, nothing can happen to me.
For example, Elizabeth in Persona, she's a famous actress who stops talking mid-performance. She refuses to be that persona that the world wants her to be, as Bergman himself suffered from the fear of being perceived and a gap between public persona and what was underneath it. And even if his intentions were genuine, he was still the one behind the mirror or the camera, controlling and directing the gaze. Thirsty Classics article writes, Liv Ullmann and Bibi Andersson were two of his greatest muses, girlfriends, and leads in film, Persona. Bergman is present as a writer, filmmaker, minor male character, and most importantly, as two women. His desire for both of them, his desire to be close to them, to be them, becomes their desire for each other. If anything, Persona is about Bergman's desire to control the two women, not to be them or even be with them. It's about his belief that they are more or less interchangeable, pawns for his artistic and personal obsession. And maybe Sign would assign this to misogyny, but I would assign it to mystification of female characters as a whole in his film that I believe comes from complex relationship with his mother. So let's talk about motherhood in Bergman's films. Bergman's mother, Karin Bergman, was cold, distant, and emotionally unavailable. And it shows. Many of his films have a female character called Karin, and moreover have a cold and estranged parental figure who chooses their job and career over their family. For example, Professor Isaac Borg in Wild Strawberries, and his mother in the same film, and his son in the same film, father of Karin in Through the Glass Darkly, who is a writer and always away, and Elizabeth in Persona, who sees her son as an obstacle to her acting career. But maybe the most famous portrayal is Autumn Sonata. Charlotte, played by Ingrid Bergman, is a narcissistic, distant mother, chooses her career as a pianist, and is absent from her daughter's life. When daughter Eva finally breaks down in a monologue about how this affected her, makes me think that Bergman is often still writes from perspective of abandoned child, and maybe it's some of his own pain is being spoken out loud. But I think Bergman can see himself in both Eva and Charlotte, as he was absent father himself. He famously had 9 children with 5 different women that he largely wasn't present for. He described himself as someone who would not sustain the ordinary obligations of love and who retreated into his own art when life made demands. Only Bergman knows if his portrayal of female characters coming from his traumatic experiences or him staying inside them. But I always would say it doesn't matter, because his portrayal of female characters spoke to many women in Sweden and to their real problems compared to the stereotypical portrayal of women in Swedish film back at the time. And up until this day, I believe he created nuanced view of women and their problems in misogynistic and patriarchal world. And speaking of patriarchy, even if Bergman portrays women living in patriarchy, do they ever stand up to it? For example, in Summer with Monica, one of the early Bergman works, he features Monica, a female character who is full of joy and exploration compared to the typical passive roles of the time. And she wants to enjoy life and escape poverty. But not only she is punished by the film narrative for that by being forced into marriage and into motherhood, when she abandons that, of course, she faces societal pressure and she's condemned by society. Then in Persona, even if Elizabeth, by going silent, protests against patriarchy, this protest only harm another woman, Alma, her nurse, and as one of the scenes in film, she says, and the lesson is clearly not sisterly solidarity. This is a trigger warning. The next part of the video will mention self-harm. Similarly, in Cries and Whispers, Karin refuses to have intimacy with her husband by harming herself, which is, again, shows act of resistance as something pathological. For Bergman has fallen under a spell of patriarchal representation. 1. Representing the act of resistance as necessarily sexual in nature, by honing in not on the female body as a holistic battleground, but upon the sexual organs solely as representing the battleground. And second, by representing the act of resistance as a simultaneously pathological act. I believe that even if Bergman's portrayal of women were mystifying them or could not stand up to patriarchy, it is still greater and more important than his understanding of women. Because as he was showing a lot of religious themes in his work, maybe he did not believe in God or trust his own image in the mirror, but he did believe in the transcendence of women and female beauty and female suffering, and that was what made his work so extraordinary and spoke to so many women.